Another important part of the security design process as you create the security framework is to do a threat modeling procedure. And threat modeling, very simply, is just identifying any possible threats to the data on your network, any possible attacks that could be made to the data on your network. Now, this is actually kind of a fun process as you really get to creatively think about what ways that people could possibly attack the data on your network. Not just the well-known attacks here. Here's where you get together a team of people and you say, well, let's see, how do people use the data? What happens if someone has an intimate knowledge of the data, like insiders? So you bring together a bunch of people with lots of information, and you think about what could happen to the network. And also in this slide, not only do we identify the threat modeling process, what that is, and how it helps make your security design more robust, but also I identify the steps to creating a threat modeling process. Now, the threat modeling process that you see on this slide here, it's not a complex process, but it's something, again, that takes time in order to master this process and in order to identify a lot of the threats to your network, or again, the possible threats. The goal here, again, is not to respond to problems, but to prevent problems from occurring. And to do that, you need knowledge, you need people, and you need time. So the first step, of course, is to assemble a team. And this team should not be restricted to the people who design the IT infrastructure or who are in the IT department, but the people who actually use the data. People who help decide what is protectable or what should be protected on the network. During this step here, during this part of the threat modeling process, you want to identify how data flows through the computer systems in the organization, and then use that knowledge to determine some of the threats. And again, you're not only looking at known attacks on the network like password hacks, but you're looking for anything that might cause a problem. If you've been with a company for any period of time, I was a crisis manager at IBM for a little while several years ago, and we saw all kinds of problems that could not adequately be prepared for unless we sat down and thought about, well, now what happens if, and what happens if, and 5 of the ideas you come up with are going to be ridiculous, but 4 of them will probably happen. So that's, again, part of the process here. Once you determine the threats with the knowledge of how data flows, maybe also determining how users use shortcuts. Maybe there's an application that's used that is supposed to work in a certain way, but users say, well, you know what, we figured out if we make this little registry hack, we can make it work a different way that is better for us. Again, is that the kind of thing you want? Is that a threat to the data on your network? Then you rank the threats. So you rank threats by risk. It allows you to deal with incidents once they occur, or it also allows you to deal with the most likely scenarios first and plan for how you're going to deal with those. After you've ranked the threats, then you determine what the appropriate response is for each threat. Some are going to cause major uproars, of course, and immediate fixes. Some of them aren't going to be as high on the list as far as a response to incidents. And then you use your security processes and your technology to try to mitigate the severity of the threat. So again, these are the things that go into a threat modeling when designing your security framework. Once you've identified some of the threats, you then need to also design an incident response. And the incident response is pretty much a similar process, but what you're deciding here is, now that we have these things that could go wrong on our network, these scenarios, how are we going to respond? So again, you form an incident response team. That incident response team's job then is to develop a response procedure. What happens in terms of communication, in terms of logging, in terms of documentation, in terms of assessment, who looks at the problem, makes decisions, how does it get handed off, what people, what departments are responsible, etc. Then that response team typically raises security awareness through, again, the use of communication. You try to get word out so that you prevent problems from occurring once you've responded to an incident. And then again, part of that raising security awareness is training your personnel on how to respond. Training personnel on how to respond, after you've made some of the decisions here, then you say, all right, level 1 help desk, here's how you respond to various incidents that we have identified through the threat assessment process. So again here, dealing with the design of the security framework, and these are 2 important components, two important building blocks that will help you design security in your network.